Today's another one of those days where I question why cEDH is even a format. Known cheaters are winning top events and 11-hour games are possible alongside the continuing issues of draws. The format has a lot of visible problems. Let's stop the whole scripted part of this video for a second here and address, yes, an 11-hour game. No TO stopped it, no judge called for slow play or anything. This was an 11-hour straight game where someone was allowed to just filibuster for hours straight on rules and politicking and just be able to extend the game to an insane point. We're going to discuss this all in a second, but why is cEDH plagued with so many active problems? Again, the draw issue is an ongoing one, and in today's video we're gonna go over it all. I want to go over the cheating allegations in one incident, the 11-hour game in another, as well as finally discuss the draw issue. I think for a lot of you non-cEDH players, you don't understand what that is, but it's a consistent one that's been happening for years based on the point system and tournament structure. So hopefully this will give you that quick intro so you can have these type of conversations outside, and then ultimately at the end of the video, I want to also talk about my general thoughts, some positives, some negatives, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm so happy someone grabbed this in a tweet because I was trying to go through our cEDH because I saw each one of these posts individually. So there's probably some level of page manipulation happening here, but regardless, cheater wins in a tournament. Okay, so that's one. That was a couple hours ago, and then SLC 10K drama. This is the 11-hour game. And then we have the tournament EDH needs help. So now we're getting the language of separation of cEDH and the tournament EDH being specifically about organized play structure with rewards and everything. And that also encompasses, for some reason, bracket 3 and bracket 4 games that I've ranted on before, where, the first seed versus the fourth seed win rates and, the tie problem and all that stuff. So we're going to go over it on this video. What a format. Anyway, let's hop into the first one, where you just have lengthy games, right? And for those, I'm bringing this one out specifically for those of you that have come across this boss in Expedition 33 and have made it all the way to the end and have beat this boss, you'll know what I mean by lengthy game. But regardless, how was there really an 11-hour finals for a cEDH tournament? How is that even possible? Folks, we have an 11-hour game of Magic. Imagine, I can't even imagine this. As a combo player myself, I play Mill and Modern, but in Pauper and in Legacy, I'm a combo player. I can't even imagine anything more than a 30-minute game. My mind's melting after that, right? How is it that a game can go so long without any TO intervention, any judge coming in for slow play, no rule structure in place to stop this nonsense? How did we get to this much? So a person down here says it's a 10-turn game and they just announce every move of priority. And folks, the concept of this will become very clear as I kind of lay out scenarios later down the line. So the 10K drama here, I don't know who watched the recent stream, took 11 hours and ended in a draw, which is a whole separate thing. We're going to touch on the draw thing later down below. Timestamps are here. But the majority of the game was on a single stack over a cloud of fairies that the Rog Thras player attempted to play. The Rog Thras player played fast and decisive. It was a large stack, but that was not the issue. The issue was that one player, Golden Sabretooth, kept on talking. I mean, hours of talking. He would take 10 plus minutes on decisions. All of this was fine and okay. How? However, he would antagonize the Rog Thras player nonstop. He would insult him, or would try to bully him into making decisions. Go back and watch the video. It's pretty gross at times. He was not being competitive. He was being an a-hole. All of this was topped off by Golden Sabretooth having a flight early in the morning, meaning that he had put a timer on the game just for him. He stalled for 5+ hours just to force a draw in the finals game. He even tried to convince the pod to let him win at the end instead of declaring a tie. I don't, this is just toxic behavior, right? As they said here, why, this is going to be as the first comment says, this will unironically just have a massive negative impact on how people view cEDH as a whole. Yes, this is the biggest poop stain on cEDH I've ever seen. This will go down as one of the wildest stories in Magic the Gathering history. On record, recorded evidence with community sentiment added on top, players kind of corroborating the issue of a cEDH game going 11 hours because, as I mentioned, someone was just filibustering. What do you mean? How do we get to this point of interaction? How do we get there? And I'm actually going to go over this all in the tie issue. Because this game ended in a tie, I specifically want to address this in the context of ties in EDH. So first of all, cEDH got this problem. The fact that we can get here between 4 players interacting with each other and the stack getting so complicated to the point where king making can actually happen, leading to these decisions made by players where the tournament structure in the United States actually leads to ties being a better outcome. How do you end up in a tie in such a high power format? Well, as I mentioned, king making is a pretty good way to kind of summarize that. So we're all going to touch on this in a second. This first section is just about the fact that, again, for the 50th time, we actually had an 11-hour game of cEDH. And notably, I'm going to link this down below to see if this ever changes, but this channel, Mind Over Matter, actually posted it. The problem is, because the stream was over like 12 hours, which low-key, you know, the tinfoil hatters are going to say that this was intentional. YouTube does not archive 12 plus hour streams. No, I would have loved to watch this. This would have been the single greatest video in Magic the Gathering history. The single greatest video. This would have been peak alongside, you know, Oko animating a Black Lotus into a 3/3 for lethal. This would have been one of the single greatest viewing experiences in this game. And the fact that YouTube doesn't have it, I hope the tournament organizer has a recording, someone has a recording, someone has something of this game. That would be amazing. I feel like we should be putting out a bounty on video of something like this. Regardless though, we will never get to see the video. But just note that because of the tournament structure, because of how the 4th player problem is exacerbated, the amount of rules, interactions, and stack pieces that cause interaction in a cEDH game, allowing the extension of certain things. So many things come together when it comes to a game ending up like this, and we're gonna address it all. Now, firstly, I'd like to take a quick aside to address one of the pieces of drama, because we're gonna centralize a large portion of this video and conversation around the 4th player draw issue as well. But in terms of cheating, we actually have an active cheater that won this game. And what's great about EDH Top 8 is, yo, by the time I've recorded this video, they actually already labeled my man a cheater. Temujin Horsey has proven cheating allegations against him. He won a cEDH tournament. For some reason, we are letting these people continue to play Magic. There's a whole discussion around, should people have a redemption arc or not? I mean, apparently, rumor has it my man went to poker and still continued cheating. Look, I don't think redemption arcs are meant for this game. Maybe at some point you can come back, like years down the line. It's just still too soon, right? Like and the problem is that when it comes to a cheating player, too much of the burden is put on the honest player. And that's because if it's outside of the tournament organizer and it's on the players of the game, whether it be in 1v1 or in a 4-player pod, every player has to make active decisions to pay attention to what that player is doing. Every time they shuffle their deck, every time they draw a card, resolve a trigger, even just a heuristic study trigger, making sure they don't draw more than 1 card, right? And by the way, that's going to become very relevant in a second. Every single decision that player makes has to be managed by the other player or players in that game. It's a large tax that player shouldn't have to be signing up for at all. That shouldn't be part of the social contract of this game. It should be on the tournament organizer to stop them from playing this game. Again, a known active cheater, more recently so. I mean, take a look at this Google Doc, right? So we have this giant Google Doc here, which I hope is like still, yeah, there you go. This is the Reddit thread. So I'm going to link this down below here. Because this is from Cheater Wins 123 tournament. So this is actually like the direct link. If you go down a little bit, someone actually has like a Google Doc of you know, the cheating proof, you know, kind of drawing things off of Mr. Gromora, drawing multiple cards and just doing multiple things here, multiple things in terms of like the triggers and everything. So the internet stays undefeated in terms of calling people out for cheating. And so again, cheaters, the redemption arc conversation is a very dicey one. I think when it comes to recency, it's hard to get these people back in. I think over time, if you have a proven track record, maybe it shouldn't be in this game. Maybe you should move on to another card game, but it seems like a lot of people cheat in other card games as well. It's a hard thing to call. In my opinion, though, this type of decision should be on the tournament organizer judge system. It shouldn't be on the player base. It shouldn't be on the player across from them or the other players involved in the cEDH game or whatever it is to be able to judge this, because it's too much of a burden of tax to put on the quote unquote honest player to manage the cheating and take it, like, watch what's happening here. There's so many situations. I've covered many cheating instances on the channel where people have, you know, shuffled weird. They shuffled through, they looked through their deck for like a fetch land or a land, and they randomly put, like, literally this was a cheat. Looking through their deck, they look for a land and they put a land on top. They put a card on top that wasn't their land. They put their land out. They put a card on top. They shuffle in such a way where the card on top is unaffected. And based on the game state, that card on top is actually not good for them. But in many ways, people were talking about how even in that way, if they were expecting to be milled, if they were expecting their opponent to maybe cut their deck based on their pattern, maybe your opponent's just cutting it in half. That's taking like the worst card you could draw and now putting it in the middle and making sure you do not draw it. And still, in many ways, that is a cheat. And so many ways people will find a way to cheat in this game. Now, I wanted to actually showcase a fun little reel of 2 cheats, right? Before we get back into the cEDH thing, 2 cheats that happen in the One Piece TCG that are absolutely hilarious. This is why I do not promote webcam gaming. The One Piece TCG is so fundamentally flawed in game design and in management, but also in its tournament structure because it has no digital client. We have to play webcam games for international kind of worldwide games. And so in this game, if you're not paying attention, what happens is this player, it has a static image of their deck on the left. Notice how their hands are kind of squeezed over to one side. Seems kind of uncomfortable, right? Because they have a static overlay of their deck here. Take a look for a second here, folks. Take a look at where my mouse is. Take a look at where my mouse is for a second here. Where is it? Where is it? Take a look at where my mouse is. You'll see a slight shift in the card. Oh, right there. Take a look right there, folks. Oh, overlay gone. So what happened was they put in a static overlay. Then someone outside of the screen added a card that they needed in that matchup or something. And unfortunately, this is the Nami deck. As a mill player, I got to take an L on this one. Nami players cheating. They added a deck through a static image on their webcam. Folks, people will find any which way to cheat. People are cheating on live coverage, adding extra lands from their graveyard, doing things with their deck. People are so brazen to do it on coverage, they will do it anywhere with any way means possible. The next incident of cheating actually was is probably the single most memorable moment of cheating I've ever seen in any card game. So this one, I actually couldn't find the original tweet. If you go to the Twitter account itself, this post is deleted as far as I'm aware. So I'm showing my video on my second channel that covers the One Piece TCG on it. So what happens here is the cheater in this weekend's Treasure Cup event. And they're saying you can see an extra card he pulls under his table, and he tries to act cool about him calling a judge. So what happens here, a cheater pulls a card from under the table, and what people started calling this, amazing by the way, under D table. For those of you that don't get the joke, in the One Piece anime, lore, verse, everything, the middle name D, right? Monkey D Luffy, Monkey D Dragon, right? Gold D Roger, right? These characters are prolific and mythical because they are led by the will of D. Like, we don't know what that D stands for. We don't know why it's so important in the verse, but the author and the drawer and the writer, they made it famous to be, like, they made it important to have that middle name. So with that joke, they called this man under D table. The cheating incident was labeled under D table. Like, I'm telling you, when this came out, this was the single funniest thing I could see on Twitter. Twitter remains undefeated on that. Whatever Elon Musk is doing to curate it is ruining that damn platform, and already has, but Lord knows its users stay undefeated. Hilarious incidents of cheating. Obviously terrible situations overall, but when it comes to a little bit of comedy and the lengths that people will go to cheat, we should be punishing cheaters by not allowing them to play the game. Obviously, we don't need anyone losing their lives over it. At the end of the day, it's a card game, but you should just not be playing the card game. Go play another hobby or something. I don't know. Just go to Roblox and I don't know. Go play something else, right? Ultimately, in the final section of this video, the bulk of this video, I hope, is going to be about the kind of draw problem and the idea of why that game went to 11 hours. Right, so in a multiplayer scenario in cEDH, we have a 4th player problem. And that is highlighted by one person I want to shout out is DefCat, a individual who's now part of Playing with Power, but also someone that I've worked with briefly to do some editing. So shout out to you, DefCat. Our partnership in that sense didn't kind of continue, but regardless, they make great content. So in this case, the turn order problem highlighted in this video, I'm going to link it down below. Go check it out. But really where this lands up is this section of that Reddit post right here. So this author aggregated over 10,000 total tournament games in September bans discussed above. Data gathered from 60 plus player tournaments only from EDH Top 16 and can provide the following information. I enter this data manually, so there may be some miskeyed inputs. However, the likelihood that my data is wildly off is increasingly small as the sample size I track grows. And that makes sense. There might be some of the percentages might be off, but like largely the statement is correct. So here, what we can see is that based on win percentages here, 25% of people going first win. Right? That means by the majority of the time, the person going first is the first one to deploy their resources in a game of cEDH and is more likely to win. Now that changes in a game of regular EDH based on table politics and the way people kind of pillow for it and the general mentality of the average EDH player. cEDH is a little bit different. Everything at all costs to win the game. 25% of the time. Then it drops steeply to 19, 17, and the fourth player is only likely to win that game 14% of the time. That is an insane drop off. That is almost 10% in terms of difference between the first player and the fourth player. Now, the other problem I want to highlight is almost 24% of the time, almost equally, the game will end in a tie. Right here, the game will end in a draw. Total 100%, almost 25% of the time, the first player will win, or almost 25% of the time, the game will end in a draw. That means if you do not go first, it is more in your favor. It is more, the higher percentage is that the game will just end in a draw. Why? We're going to highlight in a second because that has to do with the tournament structure in this game. So how does a cEDH game end in a draw? Let's address that first before we get to the why. How can a game of Commander where you just play out massive spells, game-ending things, game-ending combos like Thassa's Oracle and everything, how do games end in a draw? So the concept of king making, I think, is a pretty good example here. And this is intentional. King making is intentional. The idea of where you or someone else in the game of EDH or in a board game or in a multiplayer game in general makes active decisions to be able to choose who wins the game that is outside of themselves. So king making, player A, B, and C. Player A makes decisions to actively decide that player C will win the game while giving player B no chances to do so, right? And that's a very simple example of it, king making. And so a lot of times this can happen in the average game of Commander based on table politics. So for example, maybe the game before that, someone won in a very unsightly manner, maybe through something like Infect, and players carry that over, which is a fundamental problem with the human condition, just not being able to separate one instance from the other. That is here nor there. Regardless, they have this feeling and they want to make it so player B that won through Infect does not win. So player A says, I'm going to make sure everything I do just helps either myself or this player win. Because you know what? I can't win anymore. My deck is bad, but I'm going to make sure player C wins. That's king making. Where this can be extrapolated, right? And so this may not be intentional through some type of aggression, but it's a framework to understand this, is that what happens through multiple states of interaction. And I want to bring up the concept of heuristic study first, because in a game of cEDH where you can interact and win at any point, there are multiple cards that allow you to win at instant speed through primarily the use of blue cards. Think of a card like High Fate Trickster that you can flash in and allows you to play at instant speed. If you have a card like High Fate Trickster out, that means at any point in the game, you can win the game. You can cast any spell at instant speed. You can win in response to something. You can win on your opponent's turn. You can win on their damn end step, whenever it is. So any point in the game is an opening to win the game. So that means that when player A goes for the win, right? Player A puts Thassa's Oracle onto the stack. That cast of Thassa's Oracle may trigger multiple heuristic studies, maybe one, maybe two. And so heuristic study triggers in response to that. The heuristic study trigger will obviously go to the blue player. They're playing heuristic study. So they have played in such a way where they have not interacted with previous cards. So your assumption is that that player likely does not have a way to do anything. but you don't want them drawing off of Rhystic Study because maybe that triggers something on their board, maybe that triggers something like an Orcish Bowmasters, maybe that just draws them into some other piece of interaction. So then you interact on top of that to minimize this, because you need to stop what's going on here, because you're the next blue player in turn order and you need to cast Force Negation to counter that. The problem is that what happens is that you may not be the next person in turn order. Let's say your turn, player 3, player 2, player B, then responds to the Thassa's Oracle and the Rhystic Study trigger to then put another win on the stack. Maybe they have a High Fate Trickster and they have a Demonic Consultation Thassa's Oracle win. They put that on the stack. Great. Now there's multiple Rhystic Study triggers on the stack, and now you have to respond. So at this point, how this works is, let's assume that the Rhystic Study triggers go to player 4. Player D has no stake in this game. Let's just ignore those. I'm just highlighting the fact of eventually extrapolating this into how a game got to 11 hours. You can start to see how board states can become very complicated and stacks can become very complicated in terms of how they resolve and when you can respond. So you have a bunch of Rhystic Study triggers. You have player A who put Thassa's Oracle on the stack to win, presumably their deck's gone. Player B in response then put their own Demonic Consultation Thassa's Oracle win on the stack. You are player C. Now with your decision structure, you have a king-making scenario where you have the Force of Will. Presumably your opponents don't have the interaction to stop that. You can choose to Force of Will one player and let the other player resolve their win. At this point, the tournament rules of cEDH outline that the winner of that game gets 5 points, the losers get 0, and a tie gets 1 point. So now you can see how it's advantageous to get the tie in this scenario, because the winner is not definitive. This is one, but likely the primary scenario in which case players may decide to have a draw, because it's not necessarily clear how you can make a decision on who wins versus not. There's no monetary incentive. This is a tournament situation where prizes are on the line. Structure and judge structure is enforced to where you can't make deals that lead to winning outside, like prize structure outside of the game. This is just kept in the game. So this is a tie scenario because there is no clear way to make a decision. So players all decide to just take the draw and gain 1 point versus 0, because those points will ultimately help them kind of line up in prizes down the line. They will still keep them in the running and make sure that they are still able to prize down the line, maybe if they are able to win in their future pots. And so this is where king making as an extrapolation can lead to draws in cEDH. Now, again, I might be misrepresenting the word king making. I'm just using something that's a bit more kind of tangible when it comes to the average EDH player and kind of applying that. This may not exactly be king making. So I will admit to maybe being a little misleading here, but hopefully the frameworking of this makes sense here. That is how you get draws in cEDH, and highlighting how the game state can become very complicated, but draws happen due to the United States tournament structure. And there are many other tournament structures out there, proposed changes to this, where people have talked about a wagering system that I think other international folks use, and the fourth player problem being abated by players in different seats winning a different number of points. So for example, if you're seat number 4, I'm just making up a number here, but you could win maybe seat number 4 wins 6 points or 7 points versus winning 5 for first seat or something like that. And so that could be a good way to make it so the fourth player isn't as disadvantaged. If they still win, although at a lower percentage, they just win a higher amount or something like that, because the higher points you have, the higher seating on your seat order you get, right? You get to choose and all that stuff. So that is where we are affected by that. Now, here are my problems with this format, right? And there are a couple of primary ways that this is a problem. So when it comes to describing cEDH, a lot of people have problems with this format. It is a subdivision of EDH. Let me just get that clear. A lot of people try and argue with me on this. I don't care what you say. This is the truth. cEDH is a subdivision of the EDH format. It is not separate from EDH. It is a subdivision of the EDH format where a successful Rule Zero conversation has happened to where all players agree to win at all costs. And with that comes down the line of a metagame where there is a best deck, and that metagame leads to extrapolations of answers and sub metagames and all that stuff to ultimately get to the best deck and the best ways to win the game. Okay, there is a best deck. There is a metagame, there are ways to answer that metagame, and there are ways to build out cEDH decks in your certain colors. Okay, so again, it is a subdivision of the EDH format. With that in mind, it is a controversial one because it introduces tournament structure, prize support, and judge ruling in a system that originally was not designed for such a thing. EDH is a casual format. It's not designed for tournaments in mind. Now, although cEDH is successful with its Rule Zero conversation, a lot of issues with it arise, again, with the draw problem, the fourth player win rate discrepancy, as well as when you bring in a little bit of outside collusion, which happens every so often as well. Outside conversations, groups coming together to maybe like force a win in some way, where friends maybe like make decisions to help each other. These are types of things that you can't really stop. We are not a police organization. This isn't like a legal body trying to fight like the government or anything like that. This is just a children's card game, which again, I'm being a little diminutive here, but it's a card game where someone can't just grab your phone and check your recent texts. We can't call the police on this. Judges have to make a certain call based on collaboration with the tournament organizer to make decisions on suspicious play. But this is aligned with tournament rules. It's very different from EDH, where things are more casual, emotions are involved, play patterns are very different. One of the bigger problems with EDH that I have, the three big problems that I have with EDH, the complicated interaction structure. So Rhystic Study is a great example of this. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player plays the one. The classic, do you pay the one? And so with that, Rhystic Study can lead to a complicated state of interactions where even when the Rhystic Study trigger resolves, you get multiple situations where other things can resolve, like Smothering Tide can then resolve because I drew a card off my Rhystic Study, someone else's Smothering Tide resolves, but then also their Orcish Bowmaster resolves. But based on where their Orcish Bowmaster is going, or how that Orcish Bowmaster trigger resolves in active player, non-active player order, that can lead to different outcomes. And so then you start politicking. Now, politicking is allowed in cEDH. Now, don't get me wrong here. Just because cEDH is a tournament structure doesn't mean that politicking isn't there. It's just the concept of politicking is going to lead to different outcomes based on the successful, again, I still want to highlight this is a successful Rule Zero conversation around everyone wanting to win in the game. Based on that, the politicking will be different. Right? The politicking will be different in terms of conversations around, well, this person is playing this deck that generally has these cards. Your Orcish Bowmaster should go here. And yes, we should try and pay for the Smothering Tide trigger because that gives them the extra mana to then likely do this based on the amount of cards in their hand and based on how they've been playing. Like, these are the type of conversations you have. And so stacks can get very complicated, which leads to wins potentially happening out of nowhere. And that could be a very interesting point for a lot of people. Where that leads to complication, though, is in the next idea of time. So because of tournament structure, you have to enact a time limit on players. Now, where this failed was in the 11-hour game, because the player was able to take advantage of said rules and time structure to be able to extend the game to an unreasonable amount of time. Right? And this is not being properly enforced in cEDH here. And this was a failure of this in this 11-hour game. Because the amount of stack interactions that happen, it can lead to long games based on how people decide to resolve these. And that's perfectly fair. In a multiplayer game, think about the last time you played a game of Commander in recent times, where, first of all, on average, the amount of cards entering the format is extreme. Set to set, the amount of legendaries, the amount of quote-unquote playables, the amount of times you see in the YouTube comments or on Twitter or wherever you get your EDH content, someone saying, oh my God, this is an auto-include in X Commander. But you play against that commander and then you see a bunch of other cards and you're like, what does that do? I'm not reading all that. Just tell me when it's relevant, right? And all that type of stuff. Because of all of that, now imagine you have to pay attention to every single card and interaction that comes down. Now, obviously in a cEDH environment, there's going to be a metagame where generally you're not going to see wild cards. You're going to see on average, you're going to see the most powerful cards out there. So it's not necessarily going to be net new cards all the time, but it's a lot to keep track of, because if one card resolving causes multiple things to trigger, that is a lot to take into mind. And that's a lot to politic through. And that's what adds to the time. So you have a lot of complicated interactions that lead in contention to time being required in a tournament setting. And then that ultimately leads to draws. And so this is where not only are you forced to go to time, but a lot of times, based on how kingmaking works and a lot of people having similar interactions, and then like many ways to win, but maybe not as many ways to interact based on the game state. Maybe you spent interaction on other times that people have gone for the win. You may not have it there. And the tournament structure and the prize support structure leading to draws being better. This is where the complicated interactions, the stack interactions leading to time, and then just things being drawn is favorable, but then also leads to multiple aspects of problems for the cEDH format. And that is why we had the 11-hour game. Not only because the fourth player problem is exacerbated just through and through, it may not have come through here, but we see it through stats being a problem that they're trying to actively solve through the tournament point system. But the tournament point system in and of itself is what's leading to draws and problems like this. Because the tournament point system is enforced and involved, people follow a tournament structure, and that tournament structure has time involved and judges and TO rules in place as well. But those rules are being manipulated to further enforce the draw problem that we have in these games that leads to a form of king making, ultimately leading to bad situations like this. All three of these stories are tied in some way, shape, or fashion that leads to the negative connotations that a lot of people have with the cEDH format. And cEDH altogether, I will say, on my net thoughts of cEDH, I personally have had net positive interactions with cEDH and the people that I played with it, albeit at a limited point. I myself have a fully proxied Magda deck behind me. It is a very complicated deck in many ways. In terms of how you win, how you get there. Once you've learned the deck enough, it's simple enough, but when to go for things, it's a deck that can actually go through, like win through a lot of prison lines. It's a very complicated one. And with that, that is the only deck I want to play. I do not intend to join any high-level cEDH tournaments. Maybe if I win the lottery and I win millions of dollars, I will buy it out. And then because I don't have to work anymore, I will start spending my days playing tournament, tournament commander, tournament magic, whatever it is, maybe. But for now, I don't intend to do that. So in my casual setting, playing on Discord, playing once or twice in paper as well, I have a net positive experience with cEDH, because generally speaking, cEDH players are like the fun of EDH players, right? And there is fun to be had in EDH players. I think a lot of people have this negative connotation with the EDH format. There are a lot of bad eggs, but there's a lot of positivity as well. A lot of times, EDH players in general are very positive because it's a format where you can make any card work. And that's great, because a lot of times people look at new sets, people look at new cards and like, oh my God, this card's so cool. It sucks. It's not going to see any play in standard, any play in modern, whatever. Does it beat energy in modern? No. Does it beat Oops All Spells in legacy? No. Does it beat whatever in standard? Is it prowess in standard? No. Whatever. It's not playable. But when it comes to commander, there's always a home for it. And that leads to that positive vibe because people can always explore. And that gets extrapolated into cEDH. So you get the fun of that. Then you get the competitiveness of a constructed player involved as well. So you get some conciseness. You have people that have a goal in mind that is aligned with your goals. It's not just a player doing something silly for the sake of being silly. It's not necessarily someone bringing in bad vibes into it. They're here to win. And so it's a combination in theory of some of the two best aspects of the game, right? The drive to win, but also alongside the gathering portion of Magic the Gathering, the casualness of it, the excitement of trying new cards and trying different lines of play. And yeah, you might not get so many new cards in cEDH, but you do get rogue commanders that do actually cEDH play that are really powerful in their own right. Might be off meta tier 2, tier 3 type of decks, but those decks still win and still do have a lot of angles to do so, and they have a lot of merit in certain pots. And so again, with that combination, the players that I've come across are generally great people. They generally just want to be playing the game. I find that cEDH players are way more accepting of proxies than non-EDH, like non-cEDH players, I should say. Regular EDH players are always complaining about how you should buy proxies this, you should, or sorry, not buy proxies, not do that. I want you to own all your cards. And there's like a mixed bag of things with that. Like I think accessibility versus support for the game, accessibility versus supporting your LGS and all that stuff, whether or not you should bring proxies to the LGS. Like there's a whole complicated train of thoughts. And I think there's different ways that you can support your LGS, buying cards here and there, buying other products. Like there's a whole different line of thought you can go down in that line. But generally speaking, cEDH players, in my experience, are more open to proxies. They're generally great players to have conversations with because they know a lot of the rules interaction in the game, so they're very helpful in that case. But also, they generally just want more people to be playing the game. It's a really exciting format to play because the games don't go on for 3 hours. A lot of cEDH games don't go on for 11 hours. They can just be like 10, 15 minutes. They can go a couple turns, someone goes for an interaction, someone goes for a win, someone else interacts with that and then puts their win on the stack, and that's it. That's it. It's very nice and simple. You shuffle up, you play again, and everyone has a similar plan. You just keep going. And that's what I like about cEDH. It's the casual EDH, but with the speed of constructed 3-hour games doing that happen, there's a lot of positives about it. But when it comes to cEDH, tournament EDH, that is where things start breaking down, in my opinion. That is where the concept of Commander as a competitive format starts to fall. I have so many problems with tournament cEDH, tournament EDH in general. I feel like the problem is that people have lost their way when it comes to constructed Magic due to rotation, Modern Horizons, the way Standard rotates, the power creep in those formats, and they want to work with a more casual environment where politicking is allowed, but there's a group understanding of trying to win. And I see the merit of that. I see how two ideas can come together. And that is why in a vacuum, cEDH may actually just be the perfect format. But in implementation, it's not. It's actually the most imperfect format. It is one of the most flawed, broken, fundamentally dumb formats ever made in Magic's history. But that doesn't mean the people who play it aren't amazing people. And that doesn't mean actually in many situations outside of tournament that cEDH isn't actually honestly just more fun than regular EDH. It's a mixed bag. The problem, again, is the tournament organization of it all. How players can manipulate these rules, cheaters are allowed, the fourth player problem, and the prizing structure leads to draws being incentivized. There's a lot of problems that I don't think the player base has good ways to solve, especially with cEDH being more front-facing now, with the bracket system acknowledging cEDH as its own separate bracket. More eyes are on the format and more people are having conversations like this. And I think it's important in many ways to continue having these conversations, to have these bad moments happen so people can then use them as sample sizes to see how different solutions can be implemented, how we can change tournament rulings, how tournament organizers can implement their structures and their brackets, and how prizing is kind of laid out. Because a lot of times these decks cost tens of thousands of dollars and the prizing can be tens of thousands of dollars for first place, especially based on individual card value. So there's a lot to be had when it comes to like prizes like this. So with so much on the line, we've seen crazy stuff happen in other formats. It's no surprise that it's happening in cEDH. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What do you think about the latest controversies around cEDH? What do you think about the latest updates on cheating, fourth player problem, and the draw problem? Did I miss anything? That's the key here. If you're this far in the video, did I miss anything, or did I misspeak on any point at all? I'd love to be corrected down below, because I myself am also going down an understanding journey of all of this. Some of these problems I only know at face value. Again, being a cEDH newbie that's only played a handful of times, again, that still enjoys the format, I am only facing these problems at face value. I'm not deep in it. I have not purchased all of these cards, and I'm deeply enfranchised into this format. So I just have a different perspective, maybe a more casual one when it comes to cEDH.